Okay, now that we're in week 2, I think it's important that we discuss how I grade because this is a significant part of course, what you need to work on, go towards in the course of writing your discussion posts and in terms of the papers. So what we have in front of us now is discussion forum 1. I'm going to point out that there are several key elements that some of you missed, like right here where it says um, from your course textbook, Landmarks in Humanities, and watch The Atlantic Age. In all of the discussions, there are 2 required sources. One will be the textbook, and one will be something else. If you've already started looking at discussion forum 2, then you know it's the essay on the Enlightenment. So each discussion has a minimum of 2 sources, and it has multiple things that you have to think about. You want to give, as with this first one, a description of the cultural characteristics of African civilizations at the beginning of the 15th century, which of course is the 1400s if you're speaking historically, which we are. You would use both your textbook and the required documentary to do that part, as well as an assessment of the role that European contact had on African civilizations during the next 300 years. All right, your initial post should be at least 250 words in length and should reference and cite in APA style. Now, if you took the time to click on this link or if you took the time to read my How and When to Cite, then you know that citation is not just listing the sources that you used at the end of your discussion post or at the end of your paper. It's also this thing we call internal citation. It means that at the end of any sentence where you have used information from either the textbook, the video, or anywhere else, you cite or refer to, acknowledge that you got that information from another source. And it's very simple. As with this, it's parenthetical. You open a parentheses, you put the author's last name, you put the date, and then if you're using a book or if you're using something where you have direct ability to go to the specific place, then you put that as well. If it's a book or an article that's been published, normally that means a page number. If you are quoting, you definitely have to put that in. Most historians prefer that you also do that, even if you're just referring to something. So you must use your internal citation at the end in your works cited. Your works cited should also start with the author's last name, so that if I'm reading through your discussion or your paper and you cite Fierro, then I can go down to the works cited and see the full citation for Fierro, which would be her full name, the title of the book, the date it was published, and the publisher's information. So that if I want to get a copy of it, I could. The same applies if you're using something on the web. The location part of it's going to be the web link, but you're also going to identify the web page and the information about the website that it was on. All right, with that then, your guided response, you should respond to at least 2 of your classmates. And in those responses, you want to assess the role of art and music played in African civilizations. You may do both of them in one, or you may in your 2 responses discuss one, either art or music, and in the other one do the other one. All right. I will point out, and I'll go to this in just a second when I'm talking about what your responses to me. You may do the same in your responses to me. I'm going to respond to everybody in these discussions, unless you're posting extraordinarily late after the deadline and nobody else is going to see it, or if you're not going to have time to respond to me, then I might not then. But otherwise, I'm going to respond to every post. You are under no obligation to respond to me, but if you do, that serves 2 purposes. The first one is normally if I'm asking you a question, it's because I feel like there's something that you missed in the top post, or there's something that you need more detail about. So answering me is going to complement what you've written already. The other thing is that answering me counts as one of your peer responses. So if you're answering me and you're just going to answer me, be sure that if there is something in the guided response you're supposed to have, you kind of include that in there as well. All right, now with that in mind, let's go to these rubrics. As you'll notice here, refer to the discussion forum grading rubric under the settings icon for guidance on how your discussion will be evaluated. Your settings thing is right here. It's this triple dot thing. Most of you will have that or may even have a little settings button there. When you click on it, what you're going to get is this. This is the assignment rubric details. Now I'm going to post a written explanation as well so you can refer to it. But for most of your discussion posts, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have 4 categories: general content or subject knowledge, critical thinking, engagement and participation, and written communication. Now, the way I think of this is distinguished is your A column. In each of these things, you are being very thorough, you are giving lots of examples, you are addressing all the questions in the prompt, you are writing well, and you are citing well. Written communication has a lot to do with syntax and mechanics in this case is also your citation. So that means that to get a distinguished, you have cited almost everywhere that I think that you should have cited internally, and you have listed all of your works in the correct format at the end. You have also cited correctly and done a works cited in your peer comments, because this is something else you must do. So bear that in mind. All right, the second column, the proficient, is the B column. In this area, basically you've addressed everything you were supposed to, but you probably didn't go the extra mile. When it comes to engagement, you've contributed to the classroom conversation with the minimum number of replies, which for most of our discussion posts are 2, but you need to double check because on the post your introduction discussion, it was 3. You needed to respond to 3 of your peers. So be sure you double check that in all the discussions. Some of them may vary. You attempt to engage, you address something they said in their top post, and you complement it with information of your own. You address both the required points in the guided response description, in this case, a post about art and a post about music, or combined information on art and music, both of them. Your written communication is good, it's clear, you cited most of the time where you were supposed to, maybe not all the time, but most of the time, and you've done your works cited. The basic is your C rating. You've done effectively the bare minimum of what needs to be done in order to finish the goal. It also means that you've done your 2 replies, but maybe haven't given them as much attention as you should. The D position, below expectations, you're missing some major things. In that maybe you didn't do both of your peer responses, maybe you only did 1. If it was decent and good, then you could still get a below expectations even though you didn't get the other one, but you really don't want to go for this. You definitely want to go more towards the upper 3, right? And of course, the 0 points, this is the F column. You didn't submit, or you didn't submit anything at all like what this assignment called for. You didn't do peer responses. You had no citation. And I'm going to point this out. As we go along from this point on, if you're not using your internal citation, you're going to start getting a 0 here. The post I did this morning was to basically let you know that from this point on, I expect to see internal citation, because if you don't have it, that's effectively plagiarism, and that's, a big no-no in the academic world. All right, so this is your assignment rubric and how it operates. What I basically do is go in and say, okay, you hit most of these marks, so we're going to do that. It's going to give a total, and I'm going to write some things also when I grade anything that you do. I'll try to give you ideas about where you were good, but also what your weaknesses are. Now, I also want to take a minute and define the difference between general content and critical thinking. For me, the general content subject knowledge means that you have read the textbook and that is exemplified in what you've written, right? Several of you neglected to watch, or maybe didn't have time to, or didn't think to incorporate the documentary in your top post. Well, the documentary, or that second source, is where the critical thinking comes in, because that means you're integrating both sources and ideas from both sources and information from both sources. So if you only read the textbook and you give me a concise, pretty well detailed explanation of what the textbook says, you're gonna get a pretty good grade in the general content subject knowledge. But if you also incorporate information and you use it well, maybe in a comparison contrast, or Fierro discusses XXX, Gates and McCann complement this with their discussion of the fortress and the people who were there, and or the discussion about Islam and its effect on certain African societies. If you're discussing stuff like that, that's going to go to your critical thinking grade. So bear in mind that these are two different things. This obviously is just what history do you know? This one is how can you take that history and do something with it? And a lot of that has to do with the utilization of your second source. All right. With that in mind, then, these are the points for the discussion. Now, I'm going to take a minute also and let's look at the assignments themselves. For your assignments, like this first one on Columbus, you're using these critical thinking worksheets. Now, a couple of you have basically written essays, which is fine, as long as you incorporate all the points, all 6 of the points of the critical thinking worksheet. And most of you have. What I'm seeing right now, though, with most of the ones that I've graded, and I'm not finished, I need to go back through them one second time. A lot of you are not giving me a lot of information. Describe the issue. Okay, clearly. What's the issue with Columbus? Well, the issue with Columbus is that he arrived in the Western Hemisphere and was one of the first to encounter the indigenous peoples here. His arrival here certainly paved the way for European empires to come over and take possession of the land and develop many of the societies that are in the Western Hemisphere today. But at the same time, they also basically created a lot of what we consider today to be the bad points of colonialism, not the least of which was slavery, both Native American and transatlantic. Certainly, it was the subjugation of the Native Americans. Columbus himself did not treat many of them well. He enslaved them. He tortured a number of them in hopes to make them surrender gold to him. There were a number of things that he did that were, even at the time, things that got him chastised by the Queen of Spain and by the Pope. He was actually recalled because of that. The issue of disease, however, was that intentional? Well, the Europeans in the 1500s didn't understand what disease was. They didn't understand that their encounters with the indigenous peoples were causing the massive problems that the indigenous peoples were having. That's not going to happen for another couple of hundred years, so people are actually going to come to understand microbes, disease, viruses, things like that. So we can't per se blame Columbus for the massive numbers of deaths caused by disease brought by the Europeans, and certainly he wasn't the only European who came. But we can't blame him for some of the other things that happened. So, as with most people throughout all of history, there are good qualities and there are bad qualities, just like there are today. In your initial point here and describe the issue is, was he good or bad? Was what happened because of him good or bad, right? All right. Then you go down to step 2, which is to find the positions. Now, what I'm seeing here is that some of you are giving me, this is camp 1, this is camp 2, but you're not really giving me a lot of what their specific positions are. You're giving me the overarching idea that many people think that Columbus was bad because of what happened to the Native Americans. Okay, what happened to the Native Americans? Some of you are saying, well, he was good because he found the Western Hemisphere and got us to where we are today. Okay, great. Where are we today? What does that mean? So define your positions. Think very clearly about what these mean and give me some examples within them. Be specific. Evidence, the same thing. Be as specific as you can. Give as many points as you can on each side. Compare and contrast the positions. Pretty straightforward. Again, the more detail, the better. And then explain your personal position. Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of this. Many of you are kind of swirling around this, perhaps because you're afraid to give your personal position. I would point out that's not what you're being graded on per se. You're being graded on how well you support that position. If you want to tell me that you're of mixed minds, that's great, but be explicit. Don't dance around it. Don't make me have to wallow through a lot of abstractions because you're afraid to take a position. Don't be afraid to take a position. Take it and support it. And that also feeds into step 6, which is draw conclusions and discuss further questions. What else do we need to know about Columbus? What else should we know about him in order to make an informed decision? What details are not there? What details might be missing from the sources that you're using to answer these things? Be sure you take all of those into account. All right, so again, as I said, you don't have to use the critical thinking worksheet, but you do have to hit all the points in it. So I suggest that you be sure to be as thorough in all the points as you can. I realize there are word counts in this and in pretty much everything you have. I consider those word counts to be minimums. I do not consider them to be maximums. I don't care how many words you write, unless you're, again, dancing around a point and trying not to declare something, in which case, yeah, no, I'm not good with the spaghetti method. Don't throw a lot of stuff at me in hopes that something will stick. No, no, no. Use as many words, use as much evidence, use as much support as you need to fully support your ideas and your positions. Don't worry about a minimum word count, or don't worry about a maximum word count, again, unless you're dancing around and just not telling anything. All right, with all of that in mind, this is, by the way, a wonderful worksheet. I encourage you to think about it once you leave this class as well. I'm using it in several other classes that I have because it does make you stop and consider not just what you feel, but also why you feel it, as well as what the alternate perspectives are and what kind of evidence those perspectives have. I think today, more than ever, as we are bombarded with massive amounts of information, learning how to sort through that information, learning how to define what the actual evidence is to support each one of them is more important than it ever has been. So this is a very, very good critical thinking worksheet. Again, these 6 steps are very good ones for parsing through almost anything today. All right, if you have any questions, please email me. I am totally fine with getting emails from you at any point about anything. If you're having trouble with citation, email me. If you're having trouble understanding any of the points of the critical thinking worksheet or any of the points of the rubrics, just drop me a quick line and I will answer you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.